to a well-designed business. My name is Luann Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company Window Works from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, Vita. Thanks so much for coming back to WTF with me.
Oh, Lou, thank you so much for having me back. I love our WTF episodes here.
I do too. And I have to tell you, I've missed you over here because you are so busy making amazing content for the other podcast, Window Treatments for Profit, that we've got you so busy that we're like a little slow over here. So I'm so glad. And I'm just want to... Yes, and I need to give you an out loud high five shout out for what you have been doing over there. I listen to your episodes. I love that they're 10 minutes. Every time I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. So thank you. And I encourage everyone listening, if you have not heard about the other podcast, Window Treatments for Profit, we launched it in April of 2022, and Vita shows up every single week with Vita's Tips in 10. And she just, comes in, bangs you between the eyes with a great idea, and then hightails it back to work. So
10 minutes, no more than 10 minutes. That's all I got, right?
That's it.
It's been quite awesome, Lou, I have to say, because I feel like I'm delivering value in very small bite sizes, but nonetheless a lot of value, because this is the whole premise of it for me is it is from the trenches kind of advice. It is rooted in everyday stories that happen in real life, often in real time. I mean, I couldn't make this stuff up even if I wanted to. So I share what happens with Vitalia Inc. or in our firm or with different clients, without obviously mentioning any names or anything. But it's like those are real stories of stuff that happen. Nothing hypothetical, nothing theoretical. It's not from like the high tower consultant kind of approach. I mean, this is like boots on the ground in the trenches kind of advice. It is quick. It's in and out. It's singularly focused, which is what I love, kind of tip. And it's everything that our window treatment folks need to run a better business.
Yeah, I know. It's really good. I mean, and Madeline does a weekly segment also. Yep. Really terrific. So I just appreciate you and compliment you on the content. And so we'll put in the show notes a link to that podcast if this is new and you were like, wait, what? Another podcast?
Because Luann wasn't busy enough before.
Nah. There was 20 seconds left in every day. So
it needed to be filled.
Oh my goodness. Yes. So anyway, so here we are. We are in our fourth in the series on pricing window treatments, right? So first episode was episode 748, and we talked about the difference between margin and markup. One of the most talked about, highest rated WTF episodes we've done.
Cool.
And so, yes, and so many people were like, wow, that was great. Thank you. Because you know what, Vita, you remember in the episode, a lot of people are like me. They know their target pricing, but they couldn't have explained to you the math on how they get to it. Like I told you, Vinny just said, this is how you do it. I'm like, okay, let's just point the shark in the water and I will do it. But to literally 40 years later, to have explained it to you, to anyone in the level of clarity that you did, I couldn't have done it. So it's a great episode, and a lot of seasoned professionals had that same reaction that, oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's cool. And there's a great accompanying worksheet that goes with it on luann.com.
The goodies.
/goodies.
Yep. .com/goodies. Yes. Yep. Awesome. And then the second episode was 761. What should you as a designer charge? So it's a free world. You'll do what you want to do, but we gave you some good advice, hard and true,
Hmm.
lessons learned on some concepts and ideas so that you, as a designer, understand where and what the markups you should be doing on
Yep.
your window treatment projects, within your larger projects. And then episode number 775 was the third episode, and it says, what designers should make in profit. So, a flip
Hmm.
side to it,
Yep.
also extremely valuable. And then today, we are going to talk about how much detail that you include in your pricing estimate. And so, it's interesting because Vita and I, we do a 10-minute, like, what's the topic, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not necessarily sure where we're always going to go in this. Vita is pretty sure usually. She
Oh,
has.
oh, no, no, no. I think, wait, hold on a second. Let's do clarify here. I do the outline, right? I have it all figured out. I have it mapped out. I know exactly where I think we're gonna go. And then and then we start talking and laughing and having a great time and and adding our own context and content and experiences and mistakes and wins and losses and everything else. And so I never know exactly where we're going to end up. So regardless of the plan,
I
right?
know, I know. But you do the outline, which I'm so eternally grateful
Yeah.
for. And so the thing is, I'm curious when we do this topic, Vita, today, how much detail to include in pricing estimate? Are we talking about us as window treatment professionals providing it to the designer, but I got to believe you're talking about how much the designer should provide to their end consumer. Where are we taking this?
Yeah, right, right. So let me just kind of take a little step back here and give a little bit of context for how this particular subtopic for this whole series came about. And maybe even take a further step back and remind us that it was Sarah Lynn Brennan
Mm.
who gave me the idea of doing an episode on pricing, and then it kind of grew into a series. I think it started with a 3-part series. Now we're at a 5-part series. And so I, again, have to give a shout out and credit to Sarah Lynn Brennan because it is really her question that she came to me with. So a few months ago, she came to me for advice about a situation that she was dealing with that had to do with breaking down her estimate for window treatments at the request of the client into more of a finite detail. And she reached out to me asking, what do I do, whether she should do it, what could some of the red flags be, and in general, kind of how to navigate the situation. And so she and I exchanged a bunch of answers about it, and hopefully I helped her.
Mm.
But in the meantime, I thought, wow, what a perfectly fitting topic it could be as part of our pricing series. Okay, so really the question here is, when you give an estimate to the client, and separately we can talk about exactly how much detail to include in that estimate, whether it's just like 2 lines of drapery panels and decorative hardware installed, baba boom, done, or whether you go into a whole bunch more explanation. So we can certainly talk about that. But in this particular context, the question was, if the client is asking me for a breakdown of how much is the fabric, how much is the hardware, how much is the lining, how much is the labor, how much is installation. So all the components that go into the total price, let's say it's $10,000. So the client wants to know the breakdown of all the little components that made up that $10,000. And the question is, do we give that breakdown to her, or do we not, or do we hold back?
So, but again, we're talking about not us to the designer. We're talking about the designer to their consumer.
So it could, yes, it's
Yeah.
always consumer facing. So it's
Yeah.
either the designer to the consumer or the window treatment professional to the consumer. Right.
Okay. Okay.
Well, actually, it could also be us, the window treatment professional, to the designer too. So, you know what, let me even take it back just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
In general, when we give, whether it's between the trades or to the consumer, either way, your price is your price. And the question is, do you want to go into finite detail and break it down further into components for potential either questioning or scrutiny, or for whatever other reason that question was asked.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the first point that I want to make, and I think that was initially Sarah's struggle too, and mine would be as well, is when you get a question like that, you kind of, as a human being, we inevitably, I think the first reaction is, what's wrong? Why is she asking for additional
Mm.
pricing? And we kind of inevitably get defensive a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get defensive, nothing good ever comes out of being defensive.
Right.
So I think that's kind of the first tip here. And that is, just because somebody asked for a breakdown, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're questioning the price. It could also be that they simply just want to get an education on what all the components are and what is that level of investment for each component.
Right. Well, and I believe to me that's my advice on anything. Right. So we don't, instead of automatically, no matter what the question is from our consumer, like to your point, whether it's designers to us or consumers to designers, whatever the question is, to resist the urge to process it as an accusation, as
Mm-hmm.
a question of I'm questioning your level of integrity or something like.
Integrity. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it just like it's a question. People, look, window treatments are not $10, right? So if somebody has a question, and it goes along with what I always say, you've heard me say it 1,000 times, where a baby's born, right? When your 4-year-old says, "How do we get a baby?" you say, "The baby comes from mommy's belly," and they go, "Oh, that's fun," and they walk away. That's all they needed to know. You know what I'm saying? When they're 6, they ask a different question. When they're 12, like, you're gonna have the hard conversation. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're gonna go through the details. But the thing is to accept, like, to not assume sometimes that end consumer, whoever it is not trusting, is not, feeling that the price is justified, but not to assume that from the get-go. To just, like, we just had to come into Window Works yesterday. A designer called, Kim had given her an estimate, and she called up and she had questions on the estimate, and Kim wasn't in. And Catherine says, Lou, can you take this question? And I said, what's going on? And she said, well, she's saying that Kim gave her the estimate, but there's no measurements on it. And I said, yes, that is true. There are no measurements on it. She's like, well, I'm like, give it to me. Right. And so the thing is, I literally just do first line defense. She was like, I said, oh, hi, it's Luann. Is there something I can help you with? She goes, oh, yes, Kim neglected to put the measurements on. I said, oh, no, it's our policy not to include the measurements. And I stopped talking.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And she was like, oh, okay. Can I ask about the hardware? Sure can. You know what I mean? Like, instead of the knee jerk, well, I mean, we don't include them. And why do you have to, if you want the measurements, you have to just answer the question.
Right, right.
Right.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also, I would say oftentimes requests like that come through via email. It's kind of rare that anyone picks up the phone anymore. And so
Unfortunately, it's rare. It should happen
I'm
more often.
agreed 100%. Yep. So it's usually done in a written form, in a very kind of quick and a bit abrupt way via a text, which would be in a really kind of quick form, or an email, which would be slightly longer, but nonetheless, it's still written. And what we do here at Vitalia Inc. is that we would not necessarily respond to that in a request in written form. We would give that person a call, and the conversation would be about help us understand exactly what you are trying to learn. Help us understand how we can educate you better. Help us with what are you struggling with that you're really trying to kind of like, what is your goal here? What is our target objective here? And we try to use kind of a very inclusive language, very much we're a team. We're trying to guide you in the right direction and get you the window treatments that ultimately are in service to the project, if it's designer, or will be beautiful for your home if it's the end consumer. So to your earlier point, Kim, I keep saying that, Lou, it is about a conversation versus a knee-jerk reaction in either providing that information or not providing, because without understanding why it is that they want it and what they're going to do with it and what is their end goal, I think it would be a mistake to just blatantly give it.
Right, right. And so the thing is, I guess let's go back and focus on, I think, okay, so first of all, I think for clarity, we should probably try and focus on the designer presenting pricing to the client, right? Just
Sure.
because, so, okay, with that in mind, I'm personally not in favor of a designer breaking down the labor, fabric, lining, trim, item by item by item. Right? I mean, so I just feel like that would be if you gave a price for, tile or something, you wouldn't say, well, the mason is, $882, the grout is $48, the tile is, $2,020, and, the delivery from the place is this, and, the assistant for the mason is another 480. Like you would just say the tile is, $6,000, right?
Yep.
Okay. And so when a consumer does come back, so like Sarah had that consumer that came back and was like, what's the breakdown on this? We do have to answer the question. And so to your point, you advise that the designer pick up the phone and say, talk to me about this. What is it that is unclear? What are you trying to understand? Like go through, because that's I agree with you on this.
Right. And so for us here at Vitalia Inc., we also, just like what you just said, we usually give a total price, and we don't normally 80% of the time. So it's never and never, and it's never and always.
Right.
So, but 80% of the time, we give a total price of, let's say, $10,000, and we say there's a disclaimer that says this price includes the labor, the installation, the linings, the fabric, if we're supplying the fabric, oftentimes is the designer, the hardware, the project management fee, so the whole 9 yards. So everything is included, and there's no piecemealing of anything down the line. So this is the number. The number is the number. And so 80% of the time it does work. And then, of course, there are sometimes the other 20% that the customer or would come back and question it. And so what I always want to know, and the kind of the tone of voice that I would want to hear when we have that conversation, is these three things. Do they want to know because they want to get an education, kind of what I said earlier?
Mm-hmm.
Do they want to know because $10,000 is truly above their budget, and they need to bring this budget down, but they really want to work with you. They appreciate you as a professional. They appreciate what you have done for them on other design side with tile and with lighting, everything else. And they are truly, genuinely, and sincerely trying to find ways to work with you, the designer, and bring that $10,000 to, let's say, $8,000.
Mm-hmm.
And they're being very open about it. So, and we can talk about how to solve for that. Or there is a third way that I can think of, and that is less genuine and a little bit less sincere. And that is when the customer is kind of covertly trying to understand what the price is made up of so that she can shop it around.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I am personally not interested in being shopped around
Right.
and not having that kind of appreciation and loyalty and gratitude, and it's just it's not a great fit. I guess that's the word that would be used, but that would be the goal of that phone conversation, to understand and to really listen, sometimes for spoken words, sometimes for unspoken words. I know
Mm-hmm.
you're very, very good at like really reading the conversation. And of course, if you can get on a Zoom or a Teams call and really see the body language of the person, that would
Mm-hmm.
just be totally ideal. Of course, realizing that may not always happen, but at the very least, to hear the tone of voice and
Mm-hmm.
and how the customer is saying it versus sometimes what she is saying.
Yeah.
So those would be the three things that I would be listening to in that conversation.
Yeah. And I love that because it is the nuance between, I'm honestly wondering if there's a way to save money. I'm not looking to pull the project. I'm not looking to jump ship. I'm on and la la la, versus, yeah, I sort of wanted to check your prices and shop around. That is, to me, so much better discovered, to your point, in an actual conversation, because there's extra words that are going to come in to the connecting sentences that are not going to go into an email. And to
Yeah.
your other point, you hear the tone of voice, and that goes to the other point in the beginning of go into it with an open mind, because to take a knee jerk negative reaction and then to learn that it is simply like the education number. Well, so there's three things that we're looking to get out of it you just described, and the
Hmm.
client might want an education on exactly what is going into this $10,000. They might genuinely want to do the project with you but really feel like I got to get this budget lower, or they are actually trying to shop you around. And the thing is, the nuance between education and saving, like trying to keep you on the project and keep the project ongoing, but saving a little bit of money. That nuance in there is really a verbal and an intonation nuance, because it could be I'm on board. My partner and I agreed on a $10,000 budget, but the other
Hmm.
half of my partnership wants the justification for it. We're doing it. We're not
Hmm.
doing. I've had that happen before, where they're all like, we're doing this. It's kind of like you're going to
Yeah.
go buy a car. We're buying this car, but just remind me, is the sunroof included or not? That's all my partner
Exactly.
wants to know, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and that's something that is more easily detected through a conversation. And then also too, the person that is doing it to shop around will typically reveal themselves too. Just like with that designer that I had the conversation the other day. It was once I, answered her and we went, it was clear. It was she was most of the time when somebody asks for measurements, it's for exactly that reason. That's your knee jerk on that, right? Right? Like, what do you need these for? And when I answered her and said, "Oh no, she didn't neglect it. It's not our policy." She actually just simply said, "Oh, I typically will include to my client the rough sizes of the dimensions of the window treatments that we're covering." And I just said to her, I said, "Okay," I said, "I understand that's how you like to do it, but you'll have to get your rough dimensions on your own."
Right.
Like, you know what I
Right.
mean? Like, take out
Go
your tape
measure
measure.
your own
You know
windows.
what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
the thing
Yeah.
was, you could, like, the fact that she was like, "Okay, I get it." You could see her goal was just information and not wanting to take a step on her own. That's legit, right? If I was
Hmm.
willing to give them up, her goal wasn't, I'm now going to take this to 10 other window treatment places and make sure I got, an apples and apples estimate. And
Right.
so we never would have known that if we just, to your point, if she emailed and said, "Hey, the measurements weren't included," and we went, "Hey, we don't give them," that's now we're really in a place that's not a happy place.
Right. Because now the situation becomes combative,
Yeah.
and you never want to even get to that place at
Right.
all.
Right. And so designers need to keep this in mind, because I was doing it, trade to designer, but it's the same lesson you to your consumer is.
Yeah.
And I see that in the Facebook groups a lot. "I can't believe they asked me this." Really? You can't though? You asked them for 200 grand. Like, they're going to have a question. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. As much as I can, I try to take the approach of kind of like proven. I mean, assume innocence until
Yes.
proven guilty.
Yep.
So whenever I get any kind of questions about pricing, like I know some of my staff here internally, if we get that email back saying, "Oh, we need to get the price down. Oh, what is this made up with? Oh, is this included? Is da 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 da." So I know my staff here just kind of like, I feel like they hold their breath, like, "Oh my God, they don't like the price.
Right.
We're not going to get the project," and they're like,
Yes.
it's like the
Yes.
whole thing is going to anyway. So
It's like, take a deep
and
breath, everybody.
exactly. And I constantly, on the daily, I have to be like, it's okay. It is okay. It is just a question. They're not question. I mean, well, they're questioning, but they're not attacking you. They're not saying that it's not worth it. They're
Right.
not saying that you're not worth it.
Right.
They just simply want to understand if there's room to bring it down, or or what is this $10,000, like, why is it really worth it, which really leads back to the education component.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I mean. My approach is innocence until proven guilt, is that I always think that they need an education first. regardless of what their actual intention is, for myself, that's the strategy that I take, and that's the intention that I go into that conversation with. So when we would have that phone conversation or a Zoom conversation, it's about, well, the reason this is $10,000 is because it is 6 drapery panels. It is a two-story situation. We are using 2 widths of material for each drape, and we're using really premium linings here, and we're also doing it at 2 times fullness, and we're using the upper end of the hardware here, and the installation has to be a 2-story, like a 2-high ladder installation, and we have to bring our installer ahead of time so that he can take precise measurements, because at the end of the day, you don't want your drapes to be puddling on the floor because the length is wrong. So there has to be minimum of 2 trips for overall measurement and the installation. It is possible that we're going to need a second person, and one of us will be a part of that installation as well to supervise and make sure that everything is done precisely. And so on and on and on you can go, explaining and not necessarily defending yourself. Don't
Right.
go into it with the notion or intention of being defensive, of defending your position. It's about educating them, like, oh, really? We need to have a high ladder. Uh, we need to have high ladder in order to measure. Oh, right, of course. Wow, I didn't think about that. Oh, okay. Oh, you need to have 2 people as part of that install. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I feel really like supported and taken care of here. Okay. And two widths of material, help, then she'll be like, help me understand why we need 2 widths of material so we can go into that. So it just really becomes a educational conversation, and really letting that person know something that they either didn't know, because window treatments is not exactly common knowledge,
Right.
or they didn't realize. We just, because we don't think about things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Only us, the window treatment
Right. Yep. We
geeks,
all,
we think
egocentric.
about
We
all
know
the
what we
details.
know, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, and the other thing is, you didn't say this, but I know that you do it. And the tip here is, the more this whole detailed conversation has at the appointment, the less you need to do it after the price hits the email, right? So if I'm on a window treatment appointment with a designer or a consumer, I'm talking about that on an appointment. Okay, so we're going to use 2 widths of fabric here. All right, we're probably going to need scaffolding, or I'm going to need 2 sets of, okay, got to get this kind of a thing, and I'm going to say, and then what we're going to do is we're going to use this sort of lining because of this, it's this kind of face fabric, and we should use an interlining on this, blah, blah, blah. Are we going to do, rolled bottom hems? Are we going to do double turn 4-inch, 5-inch? What are we doing? Like, all the 2-finger pleat, 3-finger pleat, what sort of hardware, what level hardware do we need, Morgic level hardware, or can we use, select hardware, whatever it is. But the more you have an open conversation about all the details and extras that are going into the quote they're about to get, now when the quote comes, it's easier to understand. Do you agree?
Yes, a
Yeah.
100%. The more you can educate them at the appointment, the easier, to your point, it is to understand. The wrinkle there is that, for us at least, it is not often, Luann, anymore that we go on an appointment before providing the estimate. At least a top line, kind of summary level estimate. Yes.
But you still, okay. So then how do you, well, first of all, I know we both, we don't even use lower level linings. It's like, stop. I'm not even, we use the top level linings, period. There's no option. Oh, can I save 20 cents by using the other lining? No, ma'am, you cannot, because your drape is going to look crappy. And if you can't afford it, stop calling, right? So the thing is, even my retail consumers, we don't give them a choice of lesser quality on a lot of things. Now,
Right.
rods, we will go, we don't go, rods off the internet, but we will have the entry level quality rods all the way up to the super, super custom, right? But I guess because you are working solely with designers, you've probably had a lot of conversation over the course of the days, weeks, and months as you've gotten to know them, that they understand what's coming when the estimate comes. So whereas us, we are, often retail facing. And
Hmm.
so that retail consumer, her next stop might be budget blinds. And she needs to know what's happening in the quote versus what's happening in that quote.
Yeah. So, and I can see how that would really make sense that because we're much more design trade oriented versus the end consumer oriented, it makes more sense for us to just spew out the pricing without any kind of face to face. I do have to say, Lou, especially after COVID. And COVID forced all of us to work virtually and forced all of us to move things along without seeing each other in
Mm-hmm.
person. So it was starting a little bit before, but especially after COVID. And we have adopted this policy is that even to the end consumer, and admittedly we don't do a lot of them, but once in a while out of blue moon they kind of appear.
Mm.
we we it is a way for us to pre-qualify that consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So before we go there and spend an hour getting there and an hour back and at least an hour there, so it's a minimum of a 3 hour in time investment out of your day, we want to kind of give them an idea of the pricing. And so we ask them for photographs. We ask them for kind of in general what they might be thinking. And then we would come back to them and say, you are in the neighborhood of between $5,000 and $7,000 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Can the entry price level is starting at $3,500.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to tell you something. And I know we're kind of getting a little bit off again, like we're getting a little off track because we never know exactly. Forget my outline, Lou. But anyway, so it's something that I have decided for myself that the on balance, the time saved of not driving and spending time and potentially dealing with quote unquote tire kickers is worth more to me than potentially losing that order.
Mm.
So it's a business decision that I have made for Vitalia Inc. I'm not saying that it is the right decision for everyone, and for WindowWorks it may work differently and for many other people as well. It is just for me the level of disappointment and the level of sometimes abuse. Maybe abuse maybe is a bit of a strong word,
Yeah,
but
yeah, I hear you
somewhere
though.
between disappointment and abuse. I feel that it is not worth it for Vitalia Inc. staff and our time to be spent on someone who is not even in the ballpark.
Right.
And I tell you, when I was shopping for my kitchen a few years ago, before COVID, actually, 2018, I think I redid my kitchen. So we went from like builder's grade kitchen to like knocking down walls and moving plumbing, and we got this beautiful custom kitchen. So, and I went to the custom kitchen place, and before they put any kind of pen to paper, Lou, they gave me that preliminary budget.
Right.
And I have to tell you, I was grateful for
Sure.
that because
100%.
I wanted to be, I've never shopped for a custom kitchen before.
Right.
Just like half of our customers or 80% of our customers have never shopped for custom window treatments
Right.
before. And so I wanted to know with my kitchen whether I was even in the ballpark. Like, are we talking $10,000? Are we talking $100,000 for what I wanted for my space, for my needs? And so that was a really good lesson for
Mm-hmm.
me on a
Mm-hmm.
very personal level.
Mm-hmm.
And I took that lesson very much to heart, and I combined it with just my own personal feeling of not wanting to waste time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's the policy that I instituted for Vitalia Inc. Now, I have to tell you, does it work 100% of the time? Of course not. It's never and never, it's never and always.
Right.
So, can we price from pictures all the time? No, we can't. Are there weird looking windows sometimes? Yes, there are. Are there too many windows sometimes to communicate? Of course there are. But speaking from intentionality, whereas before COVID, we would get a phone call and the first question is, I'd like to get on your calendar. And we say, okay, when are you available? When am I available? And we make an appointment. And then we have some pre-qualifying questions, do the whole thing. Now it's intention is to give them an idea of budget, an idea of whether we can play in the same sandbox together.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a very long-winded
Yeah,
way.
no, it's fine. And the thing is, I'm going to start by saying I acknowledge the way you do it. I think for your business model, it makes perfect sense. It really does. I also am going to tell you that we would never do that at WindowWorks. Okay, I just did it always and never. So there's going to be less than 20% of the time that we're going to pre-qualify you over the telephone at WindowWorks. And the thing that I want to say about it is knowing your business model, that you are, I don't know, 90%, 95% designer trade. I actually thought you were 100%, but you probably are 98%, right?
Yes.
See, for my designer trade, I could see doing the first line budget pricing over the phone, through the email with the pictures, the all the thing, and actually prefer it as well. Right? Like, I don't need to be running around in circles and Kim running around in circles because you're trying to get a window treatment quote for a client that you don't have the project for. Most of the designers that we work with typically are not calling us for the window treatment quote until they've gotten the project. Okay. That doesn't mean sometimes blah, blah, blah. There's always the nevers and the 20%, right? But the thing is, for my retail consumers, I think there's a couple of things that make a difference here. Number one is that I'm okay with the retail consumer that didn't realize it was going to be 10,000, but understood that it was probably going to be 7. The retail consumer that didn't realize it was going to be 10,000 and thought it was going to be 1,000, that's a different animal. That's a different breed. But at what we have, is I've always done it instinctively. And of course, Exciting Windows has it to a process, the 7-step sales process. I'm not going to be 35 minutes into that shop at home appointment without having that qualifying conversation, without them not even realizing I'm having the qualifying conversation. And what happens is I'm not pulling out my books. I'm not taking out my tape measure. I am not, talking about, the grandeurs of this particular cravat fabric and the lining that it's going to be on. I'm not doing any of that. It's a finite 7-step sales process where within 30 minutes, if you're in the right house or if you're starting to pack up your bags and say, see you, sayonara. And here's the thing with retail, very different from the designer trade. From the designer trade, most of the time, they are designing the window treatment within the overall budget of the project, and they know what they want, the vision they want to get where they're going with the room. With the average retail consumer that's leaving their, silly lazy boy thing there and, the old carpet, and they're just doing the window treatments over, right? It's, if I come in there and what you want is 10, but you have 7, I can figure out a way to spend 7 for you. We can take the cornice off. We can change the hardware. We can, use one width on each panel instead of a width and a half. We can do that. Or if you thought it was going to be 5 and it's 10, well, you know what? We can do all the blinds this round, and I've made a customer and a friend, and I can come back in 6 months when you have the budget for the window treatment. So there is a different animal. And I know because I sell differently to designers than I do to retail consumers. And I don't mean that I sell, what I mean by that is I'm not requalifying a designer with every appointment. If the designers themselves know when their client needs qualifying, and that's another message. If you as a designer are pricing a project for a client and you're not sure how much you should budget for window treatments in this investment that you're going to present to them as the overall, like the living room is 85 grand. What do you need for window treatments in that estimate? Yeah, both Vita and I are like, hey, send us the pictures. We're going to, rough it out for you and say, hey, put 25K aside for window treatments or put 6K aside for window treatments. And then they can go back. And then when they have the contract, then they can come in and say, okay, what does it actually look like? How high, how tall, how many widths, how many this, blah, 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 right? I mean, does that make sense to you, understanding how our model is? Our interior window treatment sales are probably, I don't know if we're 50-50 or if we're 60-40, but we still have a very large retail trade for window treatment sales. And and here's what I know too is I can tell you 1,000 times I've gone in, done my 7-step process, found out that this is not our target client, that they're not willing to make the investment, but I have made an impression. I have told them about WindowWorks. They fall in love with the WindowWorks way. And if it's because that this is not their forever home, this is a 1 to 5 year home, when they are ready to make the investment, we get the call. And now they're not shopping. They're like, I remember when you were here the last time, and I really loved your ideas, and I loved the way you talked about your company, but we just weren't in that house going to invest $40K in window treatments. But this is our forever house, and we're coming back to you. So that's why I want to get in the house for that retail consumer. And I know I'm going on here, but I want to make the analogy to the designers. So if you've reached the point in your career where you are full service luxury, let's call it whatever that level is, that you have made a line in the sand. I only take full, maybe the first line in the sand is full rooms as opposed to sprucing a room. The next line of the sand is 3 major rooms. The next line in the sand might be the full floor. The next line in the sand is the whole house. What Vita is describing is she's got her line in the sand, and she's okay because her business model is set up that at this point and this level of her business, if she misses 5 out of 10 people over the course of a year, that when they hear the budget number go away, she's okay. So with you, as you reach each level, and WindowWorks, even though I'm willing to go and do the exploratory pricing, like I said, I'm not, if I get out there and you have 1,000 and what you want to do is clearly 10, I'm not figuring out a way to do it with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm figuring out a way to say goodbye and, refer me to your friends who have the right budget, or call me when it matters to you, right? And it might never matter to you. That's totally fine too. That's all inside voice. None of that ever comes out of my mouth, right? Yeah. So that's the thing. It's getting to knowing your ideal target client and how to deal with them. And I love that you have clarity on it, because that's our goal in all of us.
Yes. And you know what, you earlier, just a few minutes ago, said, does it make sense to me? What you're saying definitely makes sense to me. However, I always come back to what you say to us all the time, and that is decide what you're willing and not willing to do.
Yep.
And so, and which again goes back to the whole clarity thing too. And I feel like we can have a lot longer conversation about, my goodness, is this another episode and this becomes a 6-part series?
Well, I mean, that's the thing, because I just want to go there. I don't want that to hang there. I know, I'm so confident in my sales presentation process that I'm willing to go for a half hour to any Tom, Dick, and Harry that says they want window treatments, because I'm not going to get sucked in. See, my peers at Exciting Windows and other, when I meet people at the IWCE, where the problem comes in. And what I hear all the time is, oh my goodness, I spent 3 hours with them, and then I found out that they thought it was going to be $1,000 and what we were designing was 10. You see, that lesson needs to be taken across. And by the way, in the 7-step class that we do at Lou University, Jessica Harling teaches the same process for designers. How do you, with graciousness, with open-mindedness, with giving the aspiration, right, without making somebody feel like, hey, you're not my client, you don't have enough money, you don't have enough this and that and the other thing. How do you get to it quicker so that you're not burning rubber while you're doing it? See, for me, I have decided we will put a half hour into any person to find out and to create that connection, because it's a retail consumer. Designers, no, you're not going to make me, you know who we are, we know what we do. If you really just want a budget, then just ask us for the budget via the email, because you're educated. You can do that. I don't have to come out and educate you, right?
Yeah. And I would love just to, for our designers listening, if we were to go back to the whole when they're being asked what that $10,000 is made up of. It's whether they want education or whether they're trying to save money and salvage the project with you, or they truly are shopping around. And it is those red flag customers, that very last group, that I think we
Yes.
all need to be very weary of, whether you do decide to make that sales call, or you don't, and you do things virtually. Whichever clarity you have, and you follow that clarity, and you follow your own compass of what you're willing and are not willing to do. We all need to watch out for those red flag customers.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that, like you said, that's that last group where either we get the spidey sense or they say something directly where we know that they're asking for the breakdown because they're intending to shop it. Right.
That's right.
And so, for me, there are, to our earlier points, there are 3 ways, 4 ways, 5 ways to have the conversation that keeps it open minded. And like you said, the feeling of innocent until guilty. But once I get to that point where somebody is just literally like, whether they're saying it boldface or they really are just telling it to me between the lines, there does come a point where you do and you can just say, this is my information. You want to shop it, then make the other person do all the work too. Like I've said that. I'm like, I get it. You want to get another price, but you know what? Go get them to. You know what I mean? Go have the other have the other person come in. Have them take the measurements. Have them talk to you about how many widths it should be. Have them talk to you about what kind of rods it should be. Like, stop. I'm not doing their homework for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I will tell you that my outside voice is only marginally better than that. Like when you push me to that point where you're like, well, I just don't understand it. Like, I need to be able to shop this price. Do you really? Well, then you're a grown up. Go out in the world and figure it out. Like, I'm not going to make it easier for you, you know?
Yeah.
Now,
No,
I do want some, by the way, I do want some markers so that they can know apples and apples, though, right? I mean, that's the thing. So
well,
I don't know how you address that, since you give, like, we don't give the detail that we talked about, but we don't also just give a lump sum including everything. So how do you address that, whether it's for good purposes, your client is genuinely interested in doing the job with you but wants to know where they might save some money so they can do it, or the shop around person? How do you do that if you haven't given them any details on how to differentiate the apples and oranges?
Right. Well, and the thing is, though, when we are being asked flat out, I need to have the breakdown, and it's usually asked by the designer, since those are the people that we do 90+% of our business with, and they ask us because their customer is asking them.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually just recently, not too long ago, I had this very same scenario. The customer lives in this town on this gorgeous street. It's like every town has one of those streets with like the most gorgeous houses, and everybody knows about that street. So it was one of those streets in this most beautiful house. And it's interesting, the designer shared with us that the customer spent $150,000 on furnishings, and now they decided to redo the window treatments. It was an older house. And so we provided a one lump sum estimate, and that's when the designer came back and said the customer wants to have the breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
We called, we spoke on the phone, we did all the right things, Luann. So here's the thing, not to go back to revisit that other argument, but like, you can do all the right things, and at the end of the day, the customer is going to do what the customer is going to do. And so, and we found ourselves in the position where it's the designer. We didn't do a lot of work for her in the past, but it's somebody that we wanted to develop a good relationship with. So we were working on sort of like this good faith effort with her. And, we were kind of like, when you point blank being asked to provide estimate, and you kind of like your back is against the wall a little bit, and you've explored all the different intentions, and you're still being asked for the same thing. Well, that's that other 20%. So 80% of the time, time, you're like, okay, this is the number, this is our policy, this is the best we can do, da da da. And then, you get to the point where the other 20% have to come into play. And so we did give her the breakdown. She wanted the labor, she wanted the linings, she wanted the hardware, she wanted the installation, she did her own fabric. Yeah, I guess those 4 components. So yeah, we just gave her the very simply, without any kind of defensive mechanisms there. We just simply gave her our pricing. And the customer did come back and she questioned, well, why is this lining so much? And why is this hardware this? And why is this hardware that? And here's the thing. Here's my tip on that, you guys. This is a red flag customer. And so once I realized that, then the strategy for me, the strategy changes. And the intention is, well, for me, is no longer or not as much to what can I do to save this order because I really want to work with this customer. The intention for me, again, speaking personally in this situation is, this is my price. This is what I need to have this is the margin that I need to have in order to keep lights on, in order to keep my people happy, and in order to make a profit in the business. I can give you now inside voice, of course, all of this is inside voice.
Right.
And now I say to myself that I could give her potentially some other options of hardware, not the lining. The labor is still the same. The installation is still the same. So the hardware may change a little bit, but it's not going to be so very drastic that she's going to, that it's commensurate with the type of attitude that she was having with us in questioning the price. And so my intention then at that point becomes, I don't have to fight for every single order.
Right.
Because remind me who said that at Luann Live. They are not obligated to work with us, and we are not obligated to work with them.
I think it was Sandra Funk.
Was it Sandra? I can't remember.
Oh, wait, no. It was Luann Live virtual. It was Beth Diana Smith, wasn't it?
That's right. Beth Diana, exactly. And that was brilliant.
Yes.
And so, Lou, in that situation where we have done the educating, we have done the phone call conversations, we have done the various iterations of the estimate where we could potentially bring down the price because, the lady can't spend $4,000 on 4 drapes after she had spent $150,000 on furnishings.
Right.
That's okay. It's her prerogative. So we have done our job up until that point. And so then my intention and my strategy then switches from really wanting to salvage what we have to saying to myself, this is what it is. I have to go with my gut on this, and I am not obligated to work with her, and she's not obligated to work with me. And guess what happened in this situation?
They come around.
They come around.
They always do.
Because here's the thing, when you work with bullies like that,
that's right.
And you don't bully them back, but you push back and you stand strong in your space and you stand strong in your value, they come around.
Right.
And she did.
Well, it's like, I used to always say to my kids and, even to employees, if somebody is pulling and you're pushing or vice versa, it keeps going on. But when one of you, and I always want it to be you, whoever I'm talking to, stands firm, the pushing, pulling stops. Right? They can keep pushing, and you're standing firm. You're just standing. But when they're pushing and you're pushing back, now it keeps going. Right. And it's the same as this kind of scenario. There's you're willing to, and this is for you designers as you're pricing every part of your project. You're willing to answer legitimate questions. You're willing to provide, breakdowns where it makes sense, where it's appropriate. But when all of a sudden it gets to a point where it doesn't make sense anymore, now it's just like Beth said. You're not obligated to work with me. You don't have to order these window treatments from me, and you don't have to do this kitchen with me. It's fine, because that's the moment where you're not pushing back. You're just standing. It's like, and I've said to my kids, it's like, if somebody is arguing with you, they can only argue. It can only argue if you're arguing back. If you're just like, got it. Yep,
add
got
the oil
it.
to the fire.
Good point. Got it. Whatever. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
and that's when you will smoke out, in my opinion, the person who might be negotiating for sport or is just, looking that, like there's a lot of people like, we live in the, and like for us, we're right here with the traders, right? The Wall Streeters. I say it all the time, they're just not going to buy something without seeing if they can negotiate on it. It's a sport, right? And
Knowing your
negotiate.
customer.
Yes. And so when they recognize that your price is firm, then it becomes, oh, okay, now I have to decide if I actually want this or if I'm moving on. And if you've already done all the other things right, done all of the things, showing up on time, having the professionalism, blah, 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 you've checked all the boxes, they don't want to run away so easy. They don't. They don't.
Yeah.
And there's also a level of respect that they go, okay, so I can rely on this person. This person isn't going to get pushed around.
There's definitely a level of respect from anyone who wants to negotiate, from anyone who wants to have that breakdown for the purposes of negotiating and shopping around. There will definitely be a level of respect if you stand firm and you, at a certain point, you stop engaging.
Right. Exactly.
And so I would love, Lou, sort of, I guess, in closing, the biggest tip with any kind of pricing of window treatments for our designers listening. And I know that we've said it before, probably several times, but it's so good, it begs repeating. Your biggest strength and your biggest strategy in not being questioned and not being nickel and dimed is if you include the window treatment budget early enough in the process when you put together the entire furnishings or decorating or design budget for that consumer. Now, I realize it can't happen 100% of the time, nothing does, but if 80% of the time you can include the line item that says window treatments and put in that $25,000 placeholder, you will be so much better off at the end of the project where most of the budget has been spent and oh crap, all of a sudden there's $25,000 more to spend on window treatments. So don't let window treatments be an afterthought. They need to be part of the entire scope, just like framing, just like electrical, just like plumbing, just like cabinets, just like lighting, just like furniture, just like rugs. So everything that you're putting into your entire design budget for the space, be that one little room or the entire house or anything in between, you must make sure that window treatments is one of those line items. And you put in a placeholder, and I almost guarantee that the potential conversations for questioning or haggling or nickel and diming will be highly reduced because you will have talked about it at the very forefront of the budgeting discussions.
I 100% agree. And this is where keeping track of your data makes a difference, because just like you have a good, better, best sofa, oh, do you typically spend $5,000 on a sofa, $10,000 on a sofa, or $20,000 on a sofa? And that totally reveals your client to you, right? Your potential client to you. It's the same thing. It's look at your data. Do when you do draperies, does a typical, stationary pair of draperies with a rod and lining and the kind of fabric that you typically specify, does it cost $1,000 or does it cost $3,000? And do you have 6 windows in the living room or 2 windows in the living room? And that's where, when you're including it as in the budget early in the process, that's all it has to be. It just has to be around what it has been in the past, right? And if you've done a living room with all motorized drapes and shades and rods and all the things, and motorization made a difference of, $20K, then just say it out at the beginning, because it's like the designers, as their learning curve comes, I've heard it 1,000 times, where just like a consumer doesn't recognize how at the end of the project the accessories budget can be so large, the less seasoned interior designer, that's a learning curve. Like, they're like, oh, everything is in, but we have to do accessories. And the consumer's like, okay, great, a couple of throw pillows. Well, I need $10,000 for the whole downstairs and accessories. And it's like, no, I'm out. Like, I don't have that. And so you would, once you have really presented budget enough times with confidence, you will stand there and say, hey, you know what, for the first floor, we probably should put $40K in for window treatments, and we should put in $20K for accessories, and, blah, blah, blah. And people, the thing about it is It's, my favorite line, in my experience. In my experience, this is what it can cost. You don't have to budget for it, but you won't have them.
And I can even say just on the personal level, as a consumer, right now, I'm going through a huge renovation of my new office space. And I mean, we're knocking down walls, we're lifting ceilings, opening them up, we're dropping floors. I mean, everything is down to studs right now. Everything is getting rewired, new plumbing, new everything. And I'm working with an interior designer, actually, so I'm super happy about
Good
that.
for you,
And
smart lady.
yes, because because in design is not my forte, number one, and number two, I don't want to be shopping around. I don't want to
Right.
be going through a million catalogs and million websites and trying to figure out if this sofa is better than that sofa. I'm a huge believer in leaving it to the pros, just like I want window treatments to be left to me.
Right,
And
right.
so on the consumer side, so I am the reason I bring it up is because like the amount of money that these renovations cost, I mean, they are crazy. I mean,
Yes.
it's huge. And so if you don't budget all the things that go into the renovation, from the wiring all the way down to the pillows, by the time it's all done, I mean, we're not even like 50% in and I'm already exhausted. It's like,
Right,
this is costing more, that's costing more, da, 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 and all you see is like money out, money out, money out.
right,
So on me talking about this as a consumer, the fatigue, the spending fatigue is a real thing.
right.
So if at the end of the process, somebody would tell me, an interior designer come and be like, oh yeah, we need another $20,000 for window treatments or whatever thousand for pillows
Yeah.
and accessories, I'd be like, no.
Right,
Like
right,
I'm tired. Like,
right.
get out of here.
Yeah, right. And if you know it up front, you might be
Yeah.
tired in the middle, but you know where you're going and it's not a
It's
surprise. And that is what the role of a professional is to see the whole thing from beginning to end and help you understand it before you sign for the project so that you go in eyes wide open. And therefore, when you do hit that part where you're exhausted and tired and writing checks, your designer Vita can look at you and go, "Sweetie, we talked about this."
exactly. And she has.
uh,
Oh,
okay.
listen, Blue, to spar sometimes and agree other times and just really share what we know in our experiences to
Yes.
be true.
Yeah, no, 100%. So thank you so much. I appreciate all the perspective on this. Literally, like I said in the beginning of the show, tons of goodness coming from Vita over on Window Treatment for Profit, Vita's Tips in 10. And then, of course, her and Kimberly Seraphin from Window Works, they do WTF Live every Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern on Instagram and Facebook. And so this has become an incredible series. They've passed their 100th episode. They've passed you're getting ready to pass your 2-year anniversary, I think,
We
right?
did. We
Oh,
just
you passed it
celebrated
already.
our yeah.
Holy cannoli. That's
I know it's been
incredible.
over 2 years. We
Yes.
started during the pandemic. Yep.
Well, and I have to say, that is a next level of commitment, because you have to show up live for that. So I've been on the air for 6 years and, haven't missed an episode, but I can record it at 2:00 in the morning on Saturday if I want. Like, you have to show up. Not that I've ever done that, by the way, but you have to show up at 9 a.m. Eastern every single Friday. And you two ladies have done it. And what's interesting is I think that in the beginning, it was like, is this for consumers? Is this for designers? And you've literally found a nice sweet spot of giving value to both. But I
Yeah.
do know from designers that they tune in for that, because we're on my podcast, we're not talking about the pretty. We're not talking about how to figure out what kind of drapery rods to do. Even on the window treatment podcast, I'm not doing that. Like, I have no desire to do it. But you guys cover that in the WTF Live series. You're like, here's why you can't use traversing draperies on this rod when the rod is 10 feet wide. Like, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to do when you need scaffolding. And so I love that you guys are picking that apart. And as I travel around, many designers have said to me that they really look forward to the episode, whether they watch it live or watch the replay of it in their Facebook or the Instagram feed, and are learning about window treatment so that they can make them an actual product line that they sell confidently to the consumers, because there is a lot of profit in window treatments. And it is a hard product to shop. So
absolutely. And I mean, over the last 2 years, we have touched on so many topics. We have amassed a library of every single topic imaginable. And of course, we're working on more and new episodes and new things to talk about and educate our designers and consumers on. And if you know nothing about window treatments, it's a great series to tune into. If you know a little bit, it's good too. If you know a lot, I know a lot of window treatment pros, workrooms, who window treatments is their bread and butter, and they tune in and they tell me that they learn something new every day.
I love it.
So there's so much information there. It's incredible, and inspiration, and we have a lot of fun too, just like you and I do here.
Absolutely. All righty. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Vita, and thank you guys for listening. I so appreciate that you show up, and I just want you to go out there, make it a great day, and decide to be excellent. Thank you for joining me today. This podcast is a production of Luann Nigara Inc. If you'd like to know more about me, my books, or Luann University, go to luannnigara.com. And if you want to learn more about exciting windows, where you can get education and resources to build a better window treatment business, go to excitingwindows.biz. Have an excellent day.